It all started at the height of the Cold War, when the Middle East became a battleground for superpower rivalry. The Soviet Union actively armed Arab states that sought the destruction of Israel, supplying them with massive amounts of weaponry. Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and other countries in the region received tanks, aircraft, artillery, and missile systems. Among all this hardware, the T-54 and T-55 tanks held a special place as the backbone of Arab armored forces. These machines were mass-produced, simple to operate, and available in enormous numbers, making them the standard armored workhorse for Soviet-aligned armies across the globe. The Six-Day War of 1967 became the first major conflict in which Israel captured a significant amount of Soviet-made armor. In just 6 days of fighting, the Israel Defense Forces crushed the armed forces of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, seizing hundreds of armored vehicles abandoned by retreating Arab armies. The T-54 and T-55 tanks fell into Israeli hands nearly fully equipped, and many of them were in perfect working condition, ready for battle. Israeli military engineers got their first real chance to study Soviet machines in detail and understand their strengths and weaknesses. The Yom Kippur War in October 1973 brought Israel even more captured equipment. Egyptian and Syrian forces, equipped with large quantities of Soviet weapons, launched a surprise attack on Israeli positions. The first days of the war were extremely difficult for Israel, but then the tide turned. The Israeli army launched a counteroffensive and defeated the enemy, capturing a massive amount of armored vehicles in the process. On the Sinai Peninsula alone, Israel captured over 1,000 Egyptian tanks as trophies, a significant portion of which were Soviet-made machines. The 1982 Lebanon War brought the biggest haul yet. The operation code-named Peace for Galilee targeted Palestinian armed groups and Syrian forces stationed in Lebanon. During this campaign, the Israeli army clashed with Syrian tank units equipped with Soviet hardware. The outcome was catastrophic for the Syrians, who lost hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles. Israeli forces methodically collected abandoned and knocked out equipment, shipping it to their repair depots for study and restoration. By the mid-80s, Israel had accumulated so many captured Soviet tanks that a natural question arose: what to do with all of them? Some of the tanks were restored and put into service under the designation Tehran. Israeli engineers carried out serious upgrades on these tanks, replacing the Soviet guns with American 105mm cannons, installing new upgraded engines, and equipping the vehicles with Browning machine guns and 60mm mortar mounts. The Tehran tanks served in the Israeli army for several years and even saw combat action. But time moved on, and the potential for further upgrades to the Tehran series was exhausted. The machines were becoming obsolete, their combat value was declining, and the IDF command decided to retire them. However, instead of sending hundreds of armored hulls to the scrapyard, Israeli designers came up with an idea that would reshape the concept of a modern armored personnel carrier. The idea of building a heavy APC on a tank chassis came from a painful lesson the Israeli army learned during the Lebanon War. Fighting in the densely populated urban neighborhoods of Beirut and other Lebanese cities exposed just how vulnerable conventional APCs were against RPGs and anti-tank missiles. The light armor of standard APCs couldn't withstand hits from even outdated anti-tank weapons, and Israeli soldiers were dying by the dozens inside the very machines that were supposed to protect them. The IDF command realized that urban warfare demanded a fundamentally new vehicle, one capable of withstanding hits from virtually any anti-tank weapon. The concept was called the Life Capsule, and the core idea was straightforward. Why build a new APC from scratch when you can take a ready-made tank chassis with its massive armor and convert it into a troop carrier? A tank already has protection capable of withstanding most battlefield threats, so why not use that advantage to save infantry lives? That's how the Achzarit project was born. The name translates from Hebrew as cruel. It's the feminine form of the word, and it suits the machine well. The designers used the hulls of retired Tyran tanks as the foundation, which themselves had been converted from captured Soviet T-54 and T-55 tanks. The first step was removing the turret and its gun, freeing up a huge amount of space inside the hull. In place of the turret, they installed a low-profile superstructure with hatches for troops to get in and out. The most important change, though, was at the right rear side of the vehicle, where a special exit ramp was installed for rapid troop deployment. This solution allowed soldiers to exit the vehicle in just seconds without exposing themselves to enemy fire. Inside the modified hull, they created a troop compartment capable of carrying 7 fully equipped soldiers, plus a crew of 3, a commander, a driver, and a weapons operator. That's a full infantry squad with all its necessary gear and ammunition. Soldiers sat inside the vehicle on special seats facing the sides, which allowed them to quickly exit through the rear ramp. But simply removing the turret and adding a troop compartment wasn't enough. Israeli engineers understood that battlefield threats were constantly evolving, and the vehicle's protection had to keep up. So they added extra steel plates with special composite layers onto the hull of the former tank, creating a multi-layered spaced armor system. The idea behind this design is that a shaped charged jet from an anti-tank rocket or grenade has to penetrate multiple armor layers one after another, losing its destructive power at each stage. On top of the passive protection, the Achzarit was fitted with non-explosive reactive armor, or NERA. This is a layered system of metal plates sandwiching an elastic material like rubber. When a shaped charged jet hits this armor, the impact causes the metal layers to bulge outward in opposite directions, disrupting and deflecting the jet before it can reach the main hull. Unlike traditional explosive reactive armor, NERA doesn't use any explosives, which makes it safer for infantry operating near the vehicle and allows it to withstand multiple hits in the same area. The combination of multi-layered passive armor and NERA made the Achzarit nearly impervious to most anti-tank weapons of that era, including the widely used RPG-7 grenade launchers and first-generation anti-tank guided missiles. Naturally, all that extra armor had a serious impact on the vehicle's weight. While the original T-55 weighed about 36 tons, the finished Achzarit tipped the scales at 44 tons, making it the heaviest production APC in the world, significantly outweighing any Western or Soviet counterpart. For comparison, the American M113 APC weighs only about 12 tons, and the Soviet BTR-80 comes in at around 14 tons. The increased weight inevitably reduced the vehicle's mobility. The Achzarit's top speed on paved roads was only about 65 kilometers per hour, which was considerably slower than most APCs. However, Israeli military leadership didn't see this as a serious drawback, since the vehicle was designed primarily for urban operations, where high speed isn't a deciding factor. Crew and troop protection always came first. The Achzarit's armament might seem underwhelming at first glance for a vehicle of this size and class. There's no autocannon, no anti-tank missiles, the kind of weapons you'd typically find on modern infantry fighting vehicles. But this was a deliberate design choice, driven by simple logic. The Achzarit's primary mission is to deliver infantry to the fight alive and unharmed, not to slug it out with the enemy on its own. For that, the vehicle is meant to operate alongside Merkava tanks, which provide fire support and take out serious targets. The main weapon on the Achzarit is a Rafael remotely operated weapon station, mounted on the roof, capable of firing around 1,000 rounds per minute. What made it stand out was how it was operated. The weapons operator sat inside the fully protected hull and controlled the machine gun with a joystick, watching the surroundings through video cameras displayed on a screen in front of him. Nobody had to stick their head out of a hatch to fire, avoiding sniper bullets and shrapnel. The first production variant of the Achzarit, designated Mark I, was equipped with a 7.62 mm machine gun in the remotely operated mount. The vehicle commander had full situational awareness from external video cameras, all displayed on his personal screen. He could detect targets, aim the machine gun, and open fire without ever leaving his seat inside the armored capsule. For its time, this setup significantly improved crew survivability in urban combat, where snipers are one of the deadliest threats. In addition to the main weapons station, the Achzarit featured 3 additional mounting points for machine guns of the same caliber. One mount was located at the commander's hatch, and the other 2 were at the rear of the troop compartment. These machine guns were intended for self-defense during troop dismount and could be used by infantry soldiers to cover their teammates. However, unlike the main weapons station, these guns weren't remotely operated, so you had to open a hatch to fire them. The 60mm mortar installed on the Achzarit deserves special mention. This weapon allowed the crew to lob indirect fire at enemies hiding behind obstacles, as well as fire illumination and smoke rounds. Illumination rounds were especially useful during night operations, helping to spot enemies and light up the battlefield. Smoke rounds were used to create screens that concealed the vehicle's movements and troop dismounts from enemy observation. Fragmentation rounds could hit enemy combatants in trenches and behind cover where flat trajectory machine gun fire couldn't reach. Israeli engineers also designed a clever smoke screen system that didn't require any smoke ammunition at all. When needed, the driver could inject fuel into the engine's exhaust pipe, producing a thick smoke screen behind the vehicle. This method could generate a smoke cloud almost instantly and was used to cover the vehicle's maneuvers or troop dismounts under enemy fire. The rear section of the Achzarit deserves its own detailed look, because it's what truly sets this vehicle apart from other APCs. The clamshell exit door at the right rear of the hull allows troops to exit in mere seconds, and they can even dismount while the vehicle is still moving, without coming to a complete stop. In urban combat, that matters enormously. A stationary vehicle instantly becomes a target for RPG gunners and anti-tank missile operators. As long as the Achzarit keeps moving, it's much harder for the enemy to take aim and land a hit. On top of that, the rear ramp is designed so it can be partially opened, creating a narrow firing port. Through this port, soldiers can observe what's happening behind the vehicle, and if needed, open fire on enemies in the blind spot that the side-mounted machine guns can't cover. This feature helps protect the vehicle against rear attacks, which are especially dangerous in urban warfare, where threats can come from any direction. All of this makes the Achzarit a vehicle built for one specific job: delivering infantry into the heart of urban combat and keeping them safe until the moment they dismount. The Israel Defense Forces became the only military in the world to fully commit to heavy APCs built on main battle tank chassis. Other countries preferred building light and medium APCs, prioritizing speed and maneuverability. But Israel took a different path. The reality of the Middle Eastern theater, where urban warfare became the norm rather than the exception, demanded a completely different approach to protecting infantry. The tactics for deploying the Achzarit were developed specifically for combined operations with Merkava tanks. These two vehicles complement each other well. The tank brings devastating firepower, capable of destroying fortified positions, armored vehicles, and enemy personnel. The APC delivers infantry, who clear buildings and hold captured positions. Both vehicles share comparable levels of protection, allowing them to operate in the same formation without worrying that the APC will be the weak link. A typical tactical scenario works like this. Merkava tanks advance forward and suppress enemy positions using their 120mm guns and machine guns. Achzarits follow the tanks at a short distance, using them as shields against frontal fire. Once the tanks have neutralized the main resistance, the APCs move up to the buildings and infantry dismounts through the rear ramps. The entire process takes just seconds, and the enemy simply doesn't have time to react to Israeli soldiers hitting the ground. A key part of this tactic is the Achzarit's ability to deploy troops on the move. The driver slows to about 15 to 20 kilometers per hour, the ramp drops, and the soldiers jump out one after another, immediately fanning out and taking up positions. The APC never stops for a single second, continuing to move and denying the enemy any chance to land an aimed RPG shot. This technique demands serious training from the infantry, and the Israeli army invests heavily in that training. After dropping off the troops, the Achzarit doesn't leave the battlefield. Instead, it stays nearby, providing fire support with its machine gun and standing ready to evacuate wounded or pick up the squad once their mission is complete. The remotely operated weapon station lets the vehicle commander engage spotted targets while covering the infantry's advance. The mortar is used for laying down smoke screens or illuminating the area at night. The Achzarit first saw real combat in the 90s during operations in Palestinian territories. Fighting in the narrow streets of cities and refugee camps validated the concept of a heavy APC. The vehicles took multiple RPG hits and kept completing their missions, keeping the soldiers inside alive. Cases where crew or troops suffered serious injuries during an attack on an Achzarit were extremely rare. A sharp contrast to the losses suffered by units using conventional APCs. The Second Intifada, which kicked off in 2000, became a true proving ground for Israeli armored vehicles. Palestinian militants actively used anti-tank weapons, improvised explosive devices, and sniper fire. It was during this period that the Achzarit proved its worth over and over again. These vehicles came out of combat with dents in their armor panels and impact marks on their hulls, but with every crew member and every soldier inside, alive and unharmed. Soldiers who lived through those battles called the Achzarit their guardian angel. Operation Cast. Lead in the Gaza Strip in 2008 demonstrated how well the Merkava Achzarit combination worked in full-scale urban combat. Israeli units advanced through dense urban terrain where an ambush could be waiting around every corner. Tanks punched through building walls with their cannons while infantry, delivered by Achzarits, cleared the rooms inside. Israeli casualties in this operation were minimal, despite fierce enemy resistance. Interestingly, while a few countries experimented with similar concepts, Russia built the BTRT, Serbia created the VIU-55 Munja. None of them went as far as Israel did. No other military mass-produced and deployed heavy APCs on tank chassis as a core part of their doctrine. The reasons come down to the specific missions that different countries' armed forces face. Most armies prepare for maneuver warfare in open terrain, where speed and range matter more than maximum protection. Israel, however, fights primarily in urban environments over relatively short distances, where the heavy and slow but superbly protected Achzarit proves more effective than any lightweight APC. Over the years, the Achzarit has gone through several rounds of upgrades, each one boosting its combat capabilities and adapting the vehicle to new threats. Israeli engineers constantly worked on improving the APC, drawing on lessons from real combat and the emergence of new anti-tank weapons in enemy hands. A vehicle built on a Soviet tank platform from the 50s managed to stay relevant well into the 21st century, thanks to this continuous work. The Mark II variant received an upgraded fire control system and improved observation equipment. The vehicle commander got a thermal imaging sight that could detect targets in total darkness and through smoke screens. This expanded the Achzarit's capabilities during nighttime operations, which the Israeli army relies on heavily. Enemies accustomed to operating under the cover of darkness lost their main advantage, since the APC crew could now see them just as clearly as in broad daylight. Later variants received additional armor packages designed to counter the more advanced anti-tank weapons showing up in enemy arsenals. Engineers reinforced the roof protection against overhead attacks, since militants had begun dropping explosive devices from upper floors of buildings onto passing armored vehicles. The underbelly protection was also beefed up against improvised explosive devices, which had become a constant threat for military vehicles in every modern conflict. The Achzarit's electronics were continuously updated in line with the latest advances in Israeli defense technology. The vehicles were equipped with modern comms systems that let crews maintain constant contact with command and supporting units. A laser warning system alerted the crew when an enemy was painting the vehicle with a laser-guided anti-tank missile. giving them precious seconds to pull an evasive maneuver or pop a smokescreen. The Achzarit's power plant was also refined throughout its service life. The 650 horsepower Detroit diesel engine that replaced the original Soviet power plant required constant maintenance and upgrades. The Mark II variant later received an even more powerful 850 horsepower engine, significantly improving the vehicle's acceleration and power-to-weight ratio. Israeli mechanics built up enormous expertise with these engines and learned to keep them running even under intensive use in the brutal Middle Eastern heat and desert dust. Today, the Achzarit continues to serve in the Israel Defense Forces, more than 25 years after the vehicle was first created. The APC still takes part in operations in Palestinian territories, protecting Israeli soldiers during raids and patrols. The military command is in no rush to retire these machines, since they remain among the most protected APCs on the planet and continue to get the job done. Alongside the Achzarit, Israel developed several other heavy APCs on tank chassis. The NERA, built on the Merkava tank platform, became the next step in the life capsule concept and features even heavier protection. However, the NERA is significantly more expensive to produce, which is why the Achzarits remain in active service, complementing the more modern vehicles. The Israeli army deploys them in situations where maximum protection isn't required, but a reliable armored ride for transporting infantry is still essential. The story of the Achzarit is a strong example of how military necessity drives unconventional solutions. Soviet tanks designed for war on the plains of Europe ended up in enemy hands and were transformed into an entirely different class of vehicle. Captured equipment that could have simply been melted down was given a second life and saved hundreds of Israeli soldiers. The designers made practical use of the captured tank hulls, their heavy armor and available running gear, and built on that foundation a unique fighting vehicle with no equivalent anywhere in the world. The most protected APC in the world continues its service, and its silhouette can still be seen on the streets of Middle Eastern cities. This heavy machine, with the unmistakable outline of a Soviet tank, covered in blocks of reactive armor, still commands both respect and fear. And inside it, Israeli soldiers feel safe, knowing that the Achzarit's armor will protect them from most threats on the modern battlefield. If you enjoyed this story about how Soviet tanks became the foundation for the most protected APC in the world, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss new videos about military vehicles. Let us know in the comments which machine you'd like to hear about next.